Friends turn into enemies is something we have heard before. It seems like the catalyst for many violent feuds in the underworld. However, none of them were as merciless as this one. A district in Sweden called Rinkeby fell victim to one of the worst feuds I've ever seen. Those involved were absolutely ruthless, especially considering that some of them were only 16 years old. It would go on for nearly 6 years, and it all started with the robbery of €174,000. This is the story of Shottaz versus the DP. To capture the beginning of this feud, we need to go all the way back to July 2015, to a district in Stockholm called Rinkeby. The Rinkeby district was home to a group of young men who were not only friends with each other, but also involved in crime together, mainly robberies and substance smuggling. All was well until an event that transpired on the 22nd of July. In the early morning, a Forex exchange was robbed by 4 masked men. One of them was armed with a replica of an automatic firearm as they entered the office. Within a matter of minutes, the men managed to steal 2 million krona in cash, approximately €174,000, a seriously big haul. As soon as the police arrived, the 4 men already fled the scene. 2 left in cars and the other 2 left on motorcycles. The robbery was a success, but not everyone in the group was happy with that. A few in the group who were involved in the preparation of the robbery ultimately got left out, and this would be the catalyst for nearly 6 years of extreme violence and misery. One of the group members who was left out of the robbery was a 16-year-old boy named Musla. He simply wasn't informed about the robbery happening that day and felt offended and betrayed. And there was one man who was seen as the initiator of the robbery, and this was the 19-year-old Ismail, also known as Izzy. Even though he was probably quite happy with the successful robbery on the 22nd of July, this robbery would go on to cost him greatly. Because later on that same day, Musla and some others lured Izzy to a wooded area in Bromsten in the north of Stockholm. What has exactly transpired here remains uncertain, but around 10 in the evening, police received an emergency call about a man being seriously wounded. Within a short amount of time, police arrived to the scene as well as an ambulance helicopter. In a desperate attempt to seek help, he crawled out of the wooded area while yelling for help. He was put in the ambulance helicopter and transported to the hospital. But it was already too late. Izzy had been struck in the back several times. However, it wouldn't take long before the loss of Izzy would get avenged. Just 2 days later, on the 24th of July, around 4 in the morning, there was yet another shooting. Police were called about a shooting near the OKQ8 gas station in Bromma, west of Stockholm. Witnesses heard numerous shots being fired, after which a young man fell to the ground. He was rushed to the hospital, but his life could not be saved. The person was taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The injuries were shot wounds. Police spokesman Tawa Hag said after the incident. They later revealed that the victim was still a teenager. It was the 16-year-old Musla, the boy suspected of taking out Izzy. It was clear that the hit on Musla was revenge for what had happened to Izzy. These 2 hits caused great division in the district of Rinkeby. What used to be one group of friends, it was now turned into 2 separate groups. On one side, there was the Shottaz, and on the other side you had the Gang of 4, or 3MST. The Shottaz, a name derived from the Jamaican crime movie from 2002, were on Izzy's side. The Gang of 4 was later known as Death Patrol, or DP for short. This was a name given to them by the media and police, as this group was accused of being available for hire as hitmen, and involved in at least 7 hits unrelated to the feud we are discussing here. The split of the group would mark the true beginning of the feud, and Rinkeby wouldn't be the same anymore. It's hard to identify all those involved in the feud. Though the majority were young men of Somali descent, approximately a total of 20 young men, with the age of 16 to 24 years old, formed the cause of both groups. Ranked under them, there were tens of other gang members. To give you an idea, the 20 core members were jointly convicted of over 330 crimes, according to their criminal records. These included drug violations, weapon offences, robberies, assaults, and even hits. For a number of these young men, social services noted that all resources had been exhausted, meaning that they had tried everything to get the boys on the right path again, but to no avail. It was impossible to get them on the right path again. It was rather quiet around the 2 groups for about a year after the robbery, but that ended on the 2nd of December 2016. Police received an emergency call at exactly 9:49 in the evening. They were informed that 2 people had just been struck inside the Minta Cafe in Rinkeby. One of them was Faisal, also known as Indiana. Faisal was one of the core members of the Shottaz gang. The other victim was Faisal's brother named Sakari. They were taken out after they attempted to flee the cafe and ran towards the toilets, essentially trapping themselves in with the shooters. According to the police information, the suspects used automatic rifles. They managed to flee the scene and police were unable to arrest them. Everybody knew that this was done by members of the DP, and to make their hatred for the Shottaz even more clear, the flowers and candles that were laid in front of the cafe in memorial of the victims were destroyed, not long after, presumably by DP members. It wasn't until some time later that 4 persons from the DP were arrested as suspects in the case. However, they were eventually released when the evidence against them was insufficient. In a book written by crime reporter Diamant Salihu, he says that the family members of those involved considered the Somali tradition of a blood money ritual to end the violence before it gets worse. That ritual is basically a form of compensation paid by the suspect's family to the victim's family. The father of the brothers that fell victim sat down with the fathers of the suspects. He allegedly urged them to turn their children over to the police and make them confess everything. He demanded blood money from the families, but only one father was willing to pay. The discussions never went so far as to discuss amounts. Neither Swedish authorities nor Somali traditions succeeded in breaking the spiral. Instead, the violence continued. It didn't take long before the DP was attacked in return. Less than 2 weeks later, there was yet another incident that took place. On the 13th of December 2016, around 4:30 in the afternoon, police received various different phone calls about loud noises that sounded as if there had been shots fired in Husla, another district in Stockholm. When police arrived on the scene, they found a car with about 30 bullet holes. However, there was no injured person left in the car or anywhere in the area. That was because the 20-year-old victim and DP member named Moose managed to bring himself to the emergency department of the hospital. Once there, it became clear that he was shot multiple times, but he was not in a critical condition. He ultimately survived the attack. Police investigated the crime scene and found an automatic rifle less than 20 meters from the car that was shot at. Once again, the suspect managed to successfully make an escape. Just a few hours later, there was an incident yet again. This time, it was in Tensta, shortly after 6 in the evening. This time, police were called by shocked residents that had heard many shots being fired. After they arrived on the scene, they saw one injured man laying on the ground. The man, who was later identified as Atto, was hit more than a few times. Atto was a member of the DP and did not survive the attack. Those same residents told the police that the suspects drove off in a black Volvo. That Volvo was later found to be abandoned somewhere in the area. 2 men were arrested as suspects in the case, one of which was Aidaris, also known as Ai, though eventually both men were released and no one got convicted for the hit. The next notable thing that happened occurred a year later, on the 28th of December 2017. 3 people were arrested on suspicion of serious drug offences. The arrest occurred after a short car chase that ended in Spanga, in North Stockholm. In connection with the arrest, police also searched 2 addresses. This led them to finding more than 25 kilos of amphetamine. It was later reported that 2 of the men who got arrested were DP members named Musa and Talang. Both men got sentenced to nearly 8 years in prison. By now it was known that the DP made their money by selling narcotics, as well as being available as hitmen. 3 days later, on the 31st of December 2017, there was yet another attack that has been attributed to this feud. That Sunday, around 4:30 in the morning, police were called about a man that was struck several times in a parking garage in Rinkeby. After they arrived on the scene, that was indeed the case. A man called Karar, a 20-year-old, was struck 8 times while he was sat in the car and did not survive. Karar was a member of the DP. Police didn't want to confirm whether the reason for the shooting was related to the Shottaz vs DP feud. But for those who were familiar with the victim knew for sure. They also knew that revenge was bound to follow shortly, and that was indeed the case. About a week later, on the 8th of January 2018, just past 6:30 in the evening, 24-year-old Hamza Abdi was sat in a pizza restaurant when a man came in. Without any hesitation, the man fired off shots from close range, directed to Hamza. Hamza did not stand a chance and succumbed to his injuries on the spot. The suspect fled away and left the scene. Hamza was a convicted criminal and is said to be linked to the Shottaz, though Swedish news outlet DN reported that Hamza was cool with both sides. In such a heated feud as this, it wasn't possible to be cool with both sides. People had to choose a side and stick with it. You were either on the side of the Shottaz or the DP. There was no other option. About 2 months later, police were able to find out who was the man that took out Hamza in the pizzeria. Well, it wasn't a man yet. It was a 16-year-old boy named Abdirizak Osman, also known as Shaki, and he was affiliated with the DP. He was arrested for an unrelated incident where he was involved in a break-in into an apartment. As a result of his arrest, police found the firearm used in the pizzeria with his DNA on it. After matching the silhouette of his body and that of the shooter, who was visible on CCTV, paired with finding the exact clothes the shooter wore, prosecutors had enough evidence to convict him for the shooting. Abdirizak was ultimately sentenced to just 3 years of closed juvenile detention. Had he been 18 years or older, he would have gotten 18 years, according to the indictment. This is a prime example of why Swedish gangs are utilizing young boys for their dirty work. Those below 18 can commit the most horrendous crimes and just get a few years of juvenile detention. In addition, by doing these crimes, they can show loyalty to the group and strengthen their position within the group, which is what they ultimately want. Abdirizak's criminal career started with petty theft and drug dealing for the DP, and within a short time, it led him to taking out Hamza in the pizzeria. That's how fast it can go with these young guys. And Abdirizak's story became even more interesting. Just 2 years after the pizzeria, something unbelievable happened. On the 21st of July 2020, the then 18-year-old Abdirizak was on supervised leave with 2 of his supervisors. Unbeknownst to the supervisors, they were followed by 2 men. When they arrived at the parking lot, the 2 men approached them and threatened the supervisors. They were told that it was better not to do anything or problems would occur, insinuating that they had a firearm. The 2 supervisors stepped back, and Abdirizak and the 2 other men fled in a blue taxi. He disappeared, and police immediately put him on the international wanted list. It is mind-blowing to see how easy this was. Nevertheless, 6 months later, police managed to arrest Abdirizak again. Back to the feud itself. During the years, police did make some progress in discontinuing the 2 groups. For example, the Shottaz would take a hit on the 3rd of May 2018, as 3 men were convicted of serious weapon offences, among other things. The men were Aye, Jafar, and Shikar. On the 9th of November 2019, a member of the DP was arrested in Spain. According to Swedish police, he was one of the leaders of the gang. Back in Sweden, he was arrested for his involvement in 2 hits. One of them was the double hit at Café Minta in Rinkeby in 2016. However, both cases against him were ultimately dismissed. Swedish police allegedly informed their Spanish counterparts that the network was planning a hit in Spain, probably somewhere near Malaga. The Spanish police managed to find out his address in Malaga, but he was eventually arrested in Barcelona, where he hid under false identity. Even though Swedish police might have had some wins, the feud was still not over and was about to cross even more borders. For the next chapter in this feud, we have to travel to Denmark, to a suburb named Herlev near Copenhagen. It was June 25th, 2019 when the Shottaz arranged a meeting with a musician. What they did not know was that the musician played a double game and lured them straight into the hands of 5 members of the DP. As they drove up to each other, masked DP members stepped out of their car. Armed with both automatic rifles and pistols, they emptied their magazines. One of the victims blew his last breath then and there. Another was seriously injured and later succumbed to his injuries at the hospital. A 3rd person miraculously managed to escape. As mind-boggling as it may sound, one of the shooters could be seen taking pictures of the victims to post on social media. However, the photographer made the fatal mistake of putting himself in the picture. A figure in grey Adidas pants holding an automatic weapon is reflected in the car's paint. Not long after the incident, Danish police managed to arrest 5 men. One of them was Mohamed Ali, the 23-year-old leader of the DP. Together with 26-year-old Benjamin Owusu Afriyi and 21-year-old Mansour Ismail, he was sentenced to life in prison. The 2 other suspects were under 18 at the time of the attack and received lighter sentences of 16 years. If you compare that to the sentence they would have gotten back in Sweden, it's a very big difference. It was the first time foreigners had been convicted under Denmark's gang law. This law doubles the sentence if the crime can be linked to gang convictions. In the ever-going gang problems Sweden is currently exposed to, they might need to take a good look at the laws of their Danish neighbours regarding gang violence, as Denmark seems to be taking it more seriously. After doing nearly 2 years in a Danish jail, the Danish decided to extradite the men back to Sweden to serve the rest of their sentence there. Benjamin and another man were successfully extradited, but the 3 others refused and basically begged not to be extradited back to Sweden. Especially Mohamed Ali did not want to be sent back to Sweden. He appealed the extradition and wanted to either stay in Denmark or be extradited back to Somalia. The reason for this, according to him, was that he would not be safe in a Swedish prison. He seriously feared for his life and even requested to renounce his Swedish citizenship, so you can imagine how scared he was. Which goes to show that he apparently thought he was cool enough to do the crime, but not the time. Nevertheless, the judge has denied his appeal and he will be sent back to Sweden. Back to the feud. On the 7th of August 2019, a man named Nasser was taken out. He wasn't a gang member himself, however his brother Capone was. Capone was a member of the DP, which makes this another good indication of how ruthless these gangs are. They didn't care if you weren't an actual member of either gang of the opposing gangs. Any affiliation was already enough to be taken out. There's one hit in this entire feud that is very suspicious, to say the least. On the night of New Year's Eve 2019, Shottaz member Vincent, also known as Poi, was found in a car in Rinkeby. A witness called the police, who were quickly on the scene. They managed to arrest several people in the immediate area. A few hours later, even more people were arrested in a car in Södermalm. They were all connected to Shottaz. Police did not suspect that it were members of the DP who did it. No, they found it more likely it was done by Shottaz members themselves, Vincent's own group. One of the suspects was Yassin Mahmoud. It turned out that police arrested him right on time. He had just booked a flight to London for the next morning. When questioned, the rapper said he and Vincent were close friends, and that the two were alone in a car when someone opened the door and fired. However, his story did not match the technical investigation, which showed that the shots had been fired from inside the car. Police also found gunpowder residue on Yassin's clothing, but Yassin was only held for about 3 months before being released. As of today, he is not suspected of anything related to Vincent's passing. Vincent's passing was not grieved by the Shottaz members at all. Usually they would show support for their fallen soldier on social media and in rap lyrics. This time, there was none of that. They didn't even bother to contact the family of Vincent. The father of Vincent said in an interview, "I don't know who did what, but I'm sure they know what happened. I haven't heard from the boys, nothing at all." You would think that they would at least call and say that what's in the news is not true and that they had nothing to do with it. There are several rumors going around what the reason for this hit was. Vincent had either disagreed on something with Shottaz members or he was getting close with DP members. The truth remains unknown. By now, the DP are as good as over, as most of them are jailed or buried. People with ties to Shottaz, such as rapper Yassin, were arrested in January 2021, along with people from the Varby gang and the Dalen network, on suspicion of involvement in the kidnapping of another rapper named Einar. Be sure to watch my video about the Varby gang too, and prepare yourself for the Einar video. It will come soon. This feud has been ruthless. I've covered various feuds by now, though none of them were as merciless as this one. What has been intriguing about this feud is that most of the hits remain unsolved to this day. Definitely not a good rep for the Swedish police. For those of you who know that I haven't even covered every single detail to this feud. It's so extensive that I wanted to break it up into 2 videos. For example, rapper Yassin's role in this all deserves a video in itself. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a video about him as well. While the Shottaz vs DP feud was going on, another feud was brewing between the FLG and Husby hyenas, who are said to have ties to this feud. It's hectic, I know. I'll clarify it soon in a new video. So with that being said, if you have enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. Let me know if you'll be waiting on the follow-up, and also be sure to subscribe so you're notified for the next video. See you in the next one.